Assalamu alaikum dear students. My name is Ikra Kuratulan. I am your course instructor for the subject Applied Linguistics. Our program is BS English 8th semester. Course code of our course title is ENGL 4130. Our today topic is scope of applied linguistics. So let's start our today's topic. So before moving towards the main topic, that is scope of applied linguistics, as I tell you earlier, we will start our lecture with the definition and description of applied linguistics. Applied linguistics is a field emerging as an interface of many disciplines. It has been growing in last few decades. In recent decades, applied linguistics has been a polemic field. A realistic history of the field of applied linguistics would place its origin at around the year 1948 with the publication of the first issue of the journal Language Learning, which name is A Journal of Applied Linguistics. Uh, Over the years, the term applied linguistics has been defined and interpreted in a number of different ways and phases. In 1950s, the term was commonly meant to reflect the insights of structural and functional linguists that could be applied directly to second language teaching and also in some cases to first language, that is L1, literacy and language art issues as well. In 1960s, the term continued to be associated with the application of linguistics to language teaching and related practical language issues. At the same time, applied linguistics became involved in matters of language assessment, language policies, and new field of second language acquisition (SLA), focusing on learning rather than on teaching. So the late 1960s saw both a reinforcement of the certainty of second language teaching as applied linguistics as well as an expansion into other realms of language use. In this respect, applied linguistics began to emerge as a genuine language-centered problem-solving enterprise. In the 1970s, the broadening of the field of applied linguistics continued, accompanied by more overt specification of its role as a discipline that addresses real-world, language-based problems. Although the focus on language teaching remained central to the discipline, it additionally took into its domain the growing subfield of language assessment (SLA), L2 literacy, multilingualism, language minority rights, language policy and planning, and language teacher training. The notion that applied linguistics is driven first by real-world language problems rather than the theoretical exploration of internalized language knowledge and language development is largely what set the field apart from both formal linguistics and later from sociolinguistics, with its own emphasis on language description of social variation in language use. So we can say that applied linguistics, defined as investigates and offers solution to the language related problem. The term applied linguistics came into existence in 1940s through the effort of scientific researchers and to associate themselves from the teacher of literature. By the mid of 1950s, the term was given by the opening of schools of applied linguistics at the University of Edinburgh and by the creation of the Center of Applied Linguistics in Washington, D.C., in United States of America in 1957. Early 1970s, the field was given scope and substance by the competition of introducing applied linguistics by Corder. For applied linguistics, the central question is how far can existing models of description in linguistics can be used to resolve the practical problems of language in real life. So we can say that applied linguistics means taking language and language theories as the basis from which to explain how communication is actually carried out in real life. Applied linguistics also identifies problematic and challenging issues related to language in different contexts. Applied linguistics also analyze the issues in order to draw out the practical understanding and implications that are useful for the people in those contexts. Applied linguistics is also interested in offering people practical and helpful insight into how language and communication contribute basically to interaction between people. According to David Crystal, the use of linguist theories, methods, and findings in elucidating and solving problems to do with language which have arisen in other areas of experience. The domain of applied linguistics is extremely wide and includes foreign language learning and teaching, language disorders, translation and interpreting lexicography, style, forensic speech analysis, and teaching of reading. Furthermore, another linguist defined applied linguistics as whenever knowledge about language is used to solve a basic language related problem, one may say that applied linguistics is being practiced. So, in that context, we can say that applied linguistics is concerned with the real life problems related to language. So next we will discuss about the problem-based nature of applied linguistics. In the many discussion of trends and disciplines and subfields and theorizing, the idea is sometimes lost that the focus of applied linguistics is on trying to resolve language-based problems that people encounter in real world and in their daily life, whether they be academics, dictionary makers, employers, lawyers, learner, policy developers, service providers, supervisor, teacher, test takers, those who need social services, translators, etc. A list of major language-based problems that applied linguistics typically addresses across a wide range of settings follow. Uh, the list that we'll discuss further about the problems is possible, but it should indicate what it is that applied linguists try to do. If not, how they go about their work. So, here we will discuss the problem-based nature of applied linguistics, that how applied linguistics help to solve these problems that are related to language and that are the part of our daily life routine. So here are the problems that applied linguistics try to solve in our daily life. First one is language assessment problems. Yes, with the help of applied linguistics, different assessment problems about language are tried to solve with the help of applied linguistics, and these problems can be consist of validity, reliability, usability, responsibility, and fairness of assessment. These are the basic problems that relate to the assessment of a language. So applied linguistics help to solve these problems. Next one is language contact problem. Um, Applied linguistics also helps to solve the problems uh, that are involved in the contact language contact. For example, bilingualism, shift, spread, loss of language, maintenance of language, social and cultural interaction. So these are the problems that related to language contact, and applied linguistics try to solve these problems. Next one is language inequality problems. Uh, um, there are different language inequality problems that applied linguistics try to solve. For example, ethnicity, class, how class affects the language, and how different problems are developed due to the class, region, gender, and age. So all the problems that are related to these things, we try to solve this problem with the help of applied linguistics. Next one is language learning problem. Language learning problems such as emergence of skills, awareness, rules, use, context of language, automaticity, attitude, expertise, all these are related to language learning problems, and with the help of applied linguistics we try to solve this problem. Next one is language pathology problems. With the help of applied linguistic pathology problems like aphasia, dexes, physical disabilities that are related to language are try to solve with the help of applied linguistics. Next one is language policy and planning problem. The problems related to problem planning such as status planning, corpus planning, acquisition planning, um, ethnicity of a language, multilingualism, political factors. These are the problems that are related to language policies and learning. So with the help of applied linguistics, linguists try to solve these problems. Next one is language teaching problems. Language teaching problems such as resources, lack of training, or practices, interaction between teacher, understanding, use of a language, context, inequalities that we also discussed earlier about develop with the help of due to the sorry developed due to class, region, and gender wise inequalities are developed, so that are also the part of language teachings, right. So these things are also tried to solve with the help of applied linguistics. Next one is language and technology. Um, Different problems like learning problems in learning with the use of technology, assessment, access, use, all these things that are related to technology and language are also tried to solve with the help of applied linguistics. Next one is language use problems. how language is used and how a language works in an area are also the part of applied linguistics. In that option, in that problem, we discuss different things like dialects, register, discourse communities, gatekeeping situations, limitations, access to services, and lack of resources. All these problems that are related to language use are also discussed or tried to solve with the help of applied linguistics. Next one is literacy problems. Orthography development, new script, resource development, learning issues, all the problems that are related to literacy are also tried to solve with the help of applied linguistics. So these are few problems that we discussed here that show that applied linguistics is basically a problem based nature who try to solve the problem in our daily life routines. So next we will discuss the main topic, that is the scope of applied linguistics. As we discussed earlier, that applied linguistics is concerned with the practical application of a language in real life, in real world. Um, Basically, applied linguistics is a practical application of language studies. So the main task of applied linguistics are to identify the problem, to investigate the problem, and even to solve these problems or to find the solution of these problems that are related to language. Mm. So when we talk about the scope of applied linguistic involves with three questions, that is what we know about the language, how this language is learned, and how it is used. So the applied linguistics basically concerned with these three questions. The primary concern of applied linguistics is to the second language acquisition theory, second language pedagogy, and interrelationship of the both areas. According to Stevens, AL, that is applied linguistics, is a technology which makes abstract ideas and research findings accessible and relevant to the real world. It meditates, sorry, it mediates between theory and practice. So, where are the main aspects about the scope of applied linguistics? There are seven main aspects or scope of applied linguistics. First one we will discuss about language and teaching, in which we discuss different methods and approaches that help us to learn a language. And next one we will discuss about language and society, that how applied language in that point we will discuss that how language and society are interlinked and how they impact on each other, and what the major role of applied linguistics in that context. Next we will discuss about language, work, and law, in which we'll discuss about workplace communication, language planning, and forensic linguistics. After that is language education and learning, in which now we will discuss about the language education, additional language education, that is second language or foreign language education. Next one is language information and effect. In that point, we will discuss literary stylistics, critical discourse analysis, and translation and interpretation, information design. Next one is interpersonal and intracultural communication, and in the last we will discuss the communicative competence of individual. So these are the main points about the scope of applied linguistics. Let's move towards the main detail of these points. So when we talk about the scope of applied linguistics, according to Corder 1974, AL is the utilization of the knowledge about the nature of language achieved by linguistic research for the improvement of the efficiency of some practical task in which language is a central component. In that, our first point, the scope of applied linguistics, our first point is language and teaching. This first point covers methods of language teaching that are used in learning a language. Basically, in doing teaching learning activities, linguistics is applied on those methods. So there are different methods and approaches that are used for teaching a language or learning a language. When we talk about the approaches and method, there are different methods and approaches. First one is grammar translation method. That is a traditional method. Classes are conducted in mother tongue. This method depends on memorization of list of new vocabulary in isolation. Basically no context provided. Great attention is paid to grammatical rules. So next one is direct method. It depends on the oral interaction using of foreign language inside the classroom. It is based on the belief that language should be learned by the way we learned our mother tongue. The foreign language is learned like mother tongue in that method. Next method for learning a language is ideolingual method. It is based on the idea of overlearning and repetition. New material is presented in a form of dialogues broken into pieces, etc. Next method is cognitive code learning method. It is a more student oriented method as it focuses on his or her mentality and the complicated process that take place as learning progresses. Next method is the designer method, and there are different approaches in that method. Uh, So, designer method, first one is communicative language learning. It focuses on establishing interpersonal relationship between learners in order to make the classroom a family-like environment. Community-like environment is given to the learner, and through this community environment, the learner try to learn that language. Next one is gestropedia. It is based on the idea that the human mind can learn anything if a suitable atmosphere is provided. Suitable atmosphere like music, fears, imagination, meditation, relaxation. So that is the idea that learner can learn easily. Next one is the silent way. It focuses on the learner's independence. um, Learners should struggle to learn. Wheels are very much used to compensate for the teacher's silence. In that matter, teacher is silent, and uh, learners are independent to learn new things. Next one is the total physical response. It is based in action in learning new language. Activities based approach is that, and with physical participation, learners try to learn the new language. Next one is natural approach. It focuses on how women learn their first language unintentionally. Simple and comprehensible content is provided, getting harder as learners go on to the learning process. Next one is community language teaching, that is CLT. It focuses on helping learners to communicate in foreign language by improving their communicative competence. It also pays attention to fluency, not always accuracy. So these are the some methods and approaches that are used to teach a language, and applied linguistics is the main thing that help us to use these methods and approaches to learn a language to a child. So our next point about the scope of applied linguistics is language and society. Um, the branch in the about this scope is called as sociolinguistics. Sociolinguistic studies about the relationship between the society and language and explore or solve the problems related to the society that affects the language, varieties of language in a society, terms of taboos and euphemism, etc. So when we talk about the language and society, there are different points that are included in that. First one is language planning and policies. In that point, we discussed that in a society how a language is planned and what are the policies related to that language. Language and human rights, communication in social group, like in different social group, how a person, how a learner communicate differently in every social group. Language maintenance, that how language is maintained in that particular society or particular area. Language and identity, that how our identity is developed with the help of language. All these points are discussed in language and society, and that is done with the help of applied linguistics. This branch, as we discussed earlier, that this branch is also called social linguistics. Social linguistics also answer questions like how society affects the language, what are the varieties of a language, what the diglossic countries are, what is the relationship between language and gender, what are some examples of terms of taboo and euphemism, and why they should be used, and what are the social factors of language shift, why people resort to code switching, and how languages die and how they are revived. So all these things are discussed in language and societies, and that is done with the help of applied linguistics. So our next point about the scope of applied linguistics is language, work, and law. The scope of language, work, and law explain about communication in workplace, language planning, and forensic linguistics. First of all, we discuss about the workplace communication. In workplace communication, applied linguistics answer the question: what are the different techniques of communication in the workplace? What should be said in what situation and what time, etc. All these things are planned with the help of applied linguistics, and this also help the learner to learn new things about the language. Next point is language planning. Planning is based on some principle. First of all, it is a multidimensional activity, that it is to say it should include all the communities and localities that participate in language planning process. Second, the idea that a nation has one language only is a myth. Third, the process of language planning should not be responsibility of the education sector alone. Fourth, in order that this process is to be successful, there should be continuous revisions, evaluation, and implementation. So all these works are worked in language planning. These language planning is become possible due to applied linguistics. Third part of language work and law is forensic linguistics. It is defined as the application of the theory of linguistics to the law, including the language of legislation and the evaluation of written evidence. Some examples of these applications may be the analysis of spoken statements, that are confessions, analysis of courtroom language that are used by lawyers, judge, or witnesses, etc. Voice identification, interpretation of the language of law, and legal writing, and so on. So all these things are the part of language work and law related to language, and that is become possible due to the use of applied linguistics. So our next point is language and education or learning. This scope tries to explain about the first language education, additional language education such as second language education, and foreign language education. It also helps us to know about the clinical linguistics and language testing. Clinical linguistics basically is the study about language disability. So, as we discussed earlier, that in that we will first discussed about language education. In this part, linguists try to answer the question how infant learner learn or acquire their mother tongue. Parents do not teach their children to speak; they correct their falsehood when they misbehave, rather than correcting their language mistake. But they do not teach their language. Then how they learn or teach their mother tongue? First, language acquisition is innate, meaning that we are born with a set of language rules, which Chomsky refers to as the universal grammar. These rules, Chomsky, who belongs to the mentalist school, urge that these rules enable children to make new utterances of their own. That is, they produce new language, not only copy or repeat, but Chomsky calls this idea language acquisition device that we named as LAD, right? So additional language acquisition is our next point, in which we will discuss second language acquisition. Second language education is a youth field that started systematically in 1950s and 1960s. It is the study of how non-primary language learning take place. The majority of the community can use the second language, but it is not the mother tongue. For example, 232 million Indians are use English along with Hindi. Unlike the innate principles of first education, the second language education is based on cognitive mechanism. The first language is acquired, whereas the second language is learned. So our next point is foreign language education. Foreign language differs from second language is that in that foreign languages are not a language of communication in learner's country. For example, Egyptians speak English as an foreign language, not as second language. Next one is clinical linguistics. Crystal defines clinical linguistics as the application of linguistic sciences to the study of language disability in all its forms, and these are become possible due to the use of applied linguistics. Next one is language testing. Yes, language testing, applied linguistics, as we earlier discussed that uh, applied linguistics help us in solving the problem related to language assessment. So language testing is the practice and study of evaluating the proficiency of an individual in using a particular language effectively. The purpose of a language test is to determine a person's knowledge and the ability in the language, and to discriminate the person's ability from that of others. This branch is also called as language assessment, as we discussed earlier in problem-based nature of applied linguistics. This assessment may test listening, reading, speaking, and writing. The test pays attention to both knowledge, which is the theoretical understanding of a language, and proficiency, which is the practical use of language. So, in language testing, we pay attention to both things, as the theoretical understanding and as well as the proficiency. One is the knowledge, that is the theoretical understanding, and other one is practical use of language that is concerned with proficiency of that language. So our next point about the scope of applied linguistics is language information and effect. It studies the literary stylistics, critical discourse analysis, translation interpretation, information design, and lexicography. So in that first point is literary stylistics. It studies the different style of author. For example, one can feel this sarcastic style of the Egyptian writer Bela Fadl by only reading the title or one or two titles. We also have our own styles while speaking. The Egyptians use idiomatic expression all the time while they speak. Nearly half of our speech is not literal. So these thing is analyzed with the help of applied linguistics. Next one is critical discourse analysis, that is also known as CDA. The term critical linguistics and critical discourse analysis can be used interchangeably. CDA pays great attention to the context of the text. CDA deals with the language as social practice. It also considers the institutional, political, gender, and media discourses, as screening out that CDA is the practical linking of social and political engagement with a sociologically informed construction of a society. While recognizing in Fairclough's words that in human matters, interconnections and chains of cause and effect may be distorted out of vision. Hence, critic is essentially making visible the interconnection uh, of the things. So that is the critical discourse analysis. Which one applied linguistics is concerned. Next one is translation and interpretation. Translation sometimes is not as easy as it is believed. Specialized translation and interpreters have more complicated tasks. For example, if the text is about genetic engineering, our translator should read about the topic in both languages, in source language and the target language. Say some text type of text of translation are financial translation interpretation, legal translation interpretation, literacy translation, medical translation and interpretation, scientific translation and interpretation, technical translation and interpretation. Types of translation may be machine translation, assisted translation, screen translation, site translation, and localization. And types of interpretations are consecutive interpretations. Uh, so there are different translation and interpretation, and these are done with the help of applied linguistics. Next point is information design. It studies how the message should be delivered, how the layout should be like, what font type, color, and size should be used in that message, and in attempt to convey the information clearly and optimally useful. In other words, this branch deals with the typography or the shaping and design of the message. For example, Constantinia is recommended for a PowerPoint slideshow. So here a complete design of that message is discussed and decide. Next one is lexicography. This branch is divided into two sections, practical and theoretical. The practical section of lexicography involves compiling or editing dictionaries, whereas the theoretical section involves the analysis of the vocabulary itself, pays attention to semantics and pragmatics and the relationship between the different forms. So our next point is interpersonal and intercultural communication. Under this label fall application aiming at understanding and improving communication on interpersonal and intercultural level, which include different points as everyday communication and socialization, that how communicate in our daily life and how we socialize in daily aspect. Next one is communication is in close and more distant relationship, for example in couples, in families, at workplaces, how we communicate, and how our communication is changed with the when different social group and our relationship is changed. Next one is communication conflicts. It diagnose and therapy the different communication conflicts and try to resolve these problems. The next one is analysis of cultural differences in different genres, communicative rituals, and style occurring in different settings such as healthcare, management, educational, and legal contexts, and developing adequate forms of intercultural training. And our last point is about the scope of applied linguistics is communicative competence of individual. This scope of applied linguistics is characterized by the application of findings from language and communication related discipline that focuses on the naturalistic development of all kind of verbal knowledge and skills that are precondition for communicating, on developmental and required disorder, and on measures of fostering and acquisition of knowledge and development of skill by giving therapy to disorders. These communicative competence of individual include first language teaching, first language acquisition, and that involve with mother tongue teaching, how we learn our mother tongue. And second one is second language and foreign language or second language teaching. Next one is literacy and literacy development. And fourth one is diagnosis and therapy of development and the required disorders. Next one is changes of competence across the lifespan. Uh, that is the loss and maintenance of the language. So these are the main scope of our uh, topic, that is the applied linguistics. So here are the references that are related to our today's topic. So that's the end of our topic. Hope you will understand. Thank you so much. Stay home, stay safe and blessed. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.